Thank you for coming to the ACRL DLS Research and Publication Committee Author Forum. I'm Elena Bianco. I'm one of the members of the committee. And just a couple of housekeeping things. We will be entertaining Q&A after our speakers present. And so you can put your questions in the chat, and I will be sort of gathering and collating those questions and then passing them on to the panelists during the presentation. That's if you have any issues with sound or anything like that, you can send messages directly to the panelists, or you can send it to panelists and all attendants. And I think that's about it. Without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Kim, who is going to introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Elena. My name is Kim Wolbeck. I'm also a member of the committee, and I'm excited to introduce our presenters today. Victoria Raish is the online learning librarian for Penn State, and she is dedicated to providing equivalent access for online students and bringing their unique perspective to important conversations and decisions within the library. So she has her PhD in Learning, Design, and Technology from Penn State and has published in leading national venues, including Portal, Libraries in the Academy, College and Research Libraries, Journal of Library and Information Services and Distance Learning, and multiple book chapters. Her most recent publication is an ALA technical report that's due out in spring 2019 on micro-credentials in libraries. Next is Lori Lysick, a reference and instruction librarian at Penn State Altoona. She supports distance learners through the Penn State World Campus and incorporates online learning best practices in resident instruction. And last is Emily Morass, the business librarian and library outreach coordinator at the Penn State Harrisburg Library. She supports distance learners through the Penn State World Campus as well, and Harrisburg-based programs. So welcome to all of our presenters today. And to reiterate, they will be speaking for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have questions after the formal presentation. So please do enter your questions in the chat box. Thank you, and I'd like to welcome our presenters.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, great. So my slides, I got to check that they look good and that everybody can see them. So thank you so much for coming to the featured author Q&A. I can speak on behalf of the three of us. We're very excited to be able to do this and to kind of interact with people for the majority of the presentation. So at the beginning, we just have about 5 to 10 minutes talking about a little bit about the other articles that were featured in the top 5 posts, and then also a little background on our program for those of you who haven't had a chance to read the article, and kind of the role that the three of us have within this embedded librarian model that we've developed and are continuing to develop at Penn State. So this is the title of our paper, which gives you a little bit of insight into the way that Penn State is structured. So we have a lot of students, as I'm sure everybody knows. So we have around 100,000 students, both online and in residence at University Park, which is our central campus, and then at our 23 Commonwealth campuses, and also online through Rural Campus. So we have online learners in Pennsylvania, we have them in Korea, we have them in Europe, they're all over the place. And so our responsibility at Penn State really is that everybody is responsible for the online students, just because they're Penn State students just like everybody else, and they deserve equivalent access to library services. But then I have the ability and the pleasure to coordinate a lot of efforts. So when I talk about kind of embedded librarianship, mine is from a coordinating perspective, whereas Emily and Lori both are kind of boots on the ground, working with faculty members, embedding in courses, and interacting with students, doing all of the more intensive during the semester type stuff. And then I do more of like project management type responsibilities. So we had a nice little intro, but the three of us are from different campuses. So I'm at University Park. Lori's at Penn State Altoona, and Emily is at Penn State Harrisburg. Do you ladies want to chime in with kind of your student population there, how many students you have on campus and then also online that you are responsible for?
Sure. So at Harrisburg, we have about 5,000 students on campus, and that's a combination of undergraduate and graduate. We have about 1,000 graduate students, and then the rest are undergrads. World Campus uses some campus-based programming as the foundation for the online World Campus programs. So at Penn State Harrisburg, we are actually the center where our criminal justice program for World Campus is centered, and Homeland Security are centered out of Harrisburg. So we definitely have people on our campus that are familiar with World Campus programs, maybe teaching them, students may be taking some of them. They can take a few World Campus credits or online credits out of Harrisburg or another campus to help fulfill their degree requirements. And yeah, so traditionally a lot of undergrads on our campus, but we do have that graduate population. And I am serving with a lot of political science students, as is Lori. So those aren't based out of my campus, and I work remotely with the faculty member for my courses.
Hi, at Altoona, our student population is approximately 3,400 students, and they are all undergraduates. We do not have any graduate programs. Most of our programming is for 2 years, and then the students will then transfer to University Park. However, we do have a handful of 4-year programs, and we do have very active programs in those areas where students will then go on to their careers. And then some students that decide that maybe they've started out with the 2-year program with the intent to go to University Park end up staying for a variety of reasons. So, you know, it changes. We do not have a strong online program at Altoona. However, that's something we're hoping that is going to grow. For online use, the students typically will enroll in the traditional online courses offered through Penn State. That's not necessarily World Campus, but there are a handful. And we do have a very small contingent of students that are enrolled in World Campus courses, not any courses at Altoona, but because they live in the area, they will come into the Penn State Altoona Library to seek assistance.
And Lori and I have experienced that in helping each other. Yeah. We have some students that go to Altoona for assistance and are also working online with me in the course.
Yeah, so they're getting a 2-for-1 with librarians, and it's been interesting to compare notes.
Yeah, great. So yeah, to give a little bit of context, World Campus is Penn State's online basically campus, and so it's a separate admissions process and financial aid, and the students who are World Campus students have their own class selection essentially, so that the classes they need don't fill up with resident students who could feasibly take another class. But World Campus is definitely not the only. There's about 20,000 students in World Campus, and about 44% of them actually still live within the state of Pennsylvania. But World Campus definitely is not the only online learning happening at Penn State. So a lot of instructors will offer their residence classes either through a hybrid model or a completely online web model. And a lot of the campuses will do shared programming where they don't have necessarily enough students for the major at their campus, but between 3 campuses they do. And so then they can offer, for example, there's a corporate communications major that's offered through a few different campuses. And so then students at one campus will take online courses for some of their courses, and then other ones of their courses, they'll be in the room, but then the students from the other campuses will be online. So Penn State does online learning in a few different ways. And so as librarians, we have to think about those different ways and how we can support various students within those campuses, and then also within the World Campus. And we can definitely, in addition to our article and kind of like our embedded role, if you have supplementary or ancillary questions about World Campus and how online learning works at Penn State, we can definitely answer those as well. So we did want to highlight that we wrote one article, but there was 4 other articles that were selected to kind of be publicized and said, hey, these are really high quality when you think about embedded librarianship. So we just wanted to highlight those quickly. Two of them were literature reviews, and then there was a case study and then a technical report piece. So the literature review, this is directly from their abstract, but basically it's what they're adding to the literature from this paper. So it was should be of interest to those who want to look at embedded librarianship holistically and see what's been published in the field and kind of what it looks like at different places. And then we have the reference for the remote user through embedded librarianship, which focused on really bringing high value librarianship and looking at what technology tools are available that afford this kind of relationship, right? Because it wasn't too long ago that we wouldn't have been able to have embedded relationships like this with students just because the technology wasn't there for us to be able to do it. And then this was the case study that looked specifically between an embedded librarian and a subject librarian and a faculty member. So the subject librarian was the embedded librarian, and looked at basically in that intensive one-on-one relationship, what's selected for the courses and all of those kinds of things, how it's assessed, library resources, and what the librarian actually did in the course. And then the last article that was not our article was actually a technical report that I wrote, and the technical report was for the library technical report for ALA, and it looked broadly at how Penn State is integrating into the learning management system, which in our case is Canvas. So it looked at that and looked at the technical aspects of the librarian role within the learning management system. So the librarian role is only one aspect of our embedded librarian program at Penn State, but it is pretty crucial from the student perspective so that they're able to either identify the librarian who's in their course or identify their instructor as not their librarian, because it never ceases to amaze me how many students actually don't know the name of their instructor.
Though I can say that I've been there. I did take some online classes when I was completing my library science degree, and when I went to the library to borrow some course reserves, I cannot for the life of me remember my instructor's last name because he let us call him by his first name.
Yeah, no, it's understandable. I mean, I don't remember my instructors' names now at this point. You know, I only remember a couple that had an impact on me. So we definitely want to make sure students are clear on the librarian and clear on who the instructor is. And then also, you know, there could be TAs in the course or instructional designers who help with technical aspects and those kinds of things. Penn State has the most instructional designers of any institution in the United States. We have the highest amount of instructional designers, so they definitely have a huge part to play in World Campus courses and other online courses. So now I'm going to touch briefly on our embedded librarian program at Penn State, and a lot of this was covered in the article, so we're just going to touch on it loosely, do some quick takes, and then kind of the structure of our online learning environment and how we collaborate in it. So political science was the first eager participant. So basically, I pitched this idea my very first year. I started in 2016 in a newsletter that went out to relevant stakeholders outside of the library. And instructional designer who worked on political science courses said, hey, I think this could have, you know, add a lot of value to our program. So kind of got connected that way, ended up meeting the program head, pitching the idea to her, and she actually solicited proposals from her faculty members, which was interesting. So if a faculty member wanted an embedded librarian in their World Campus course, they had to write why. So she basically did like a request for proposals, and then from those, we were able to, that provided a really good footing for like our jumping off conversation for kind of what the embedded librarian can do in the course. So this is just an estimate because it does fluctuate, but around 16 classes per semester at this point have an embedded librarian in them. And anybody who's done embedded librarianship knows that it's a relatively boutique or like personalized high touch model. So obviously we can't scale to every course and every librarian, etc. And then assessments, we look at assessments from a quality perspective, and they also look at assessments of the learning that's being done in the course. And that's pretty heavy at the beginning of an embedded librarianship. But then as the assessments kind of show repetitive measures, we use them less often because everybody gets, you know, survey fatigue and assessment fatigue. And then there's multiple launching paths within our program. So the political science model launched one way, but there's definitely more than one way to set up an embedded librarian relationship. And so we just kind of try to be flexible and work with what the programs give us and what the programs are already working on. So World Campus does not have any of their own faculty. So they offer courses through academic units. And so those are the faculty we work with. And students from Penn State, your diploma or your degree or whatever transcript, whatever you might get, it doesn't say Penn State Rural Campus. It doesn't say Penn State Scranton. It just says Penn State. So we really believe in the one university that's geographically distributed. And so the education quality and consistency is similar across the campuses. So this is really the scope of involvement we have with embedded librarianship. So we go from light to full. And Emily and Lori definitely can touch on this more in depth than I can, but we have the light model, which you can scale from light to full, or you can stay strictly in light, or you can spend a long time planning and go straight into a full embedded librarianship model. But in the light involvement, maybe you have some like optional course participation, a discussion forum, and Lori can touch on this real quick for her one class that she works with, that she started with the light model and kind of evolved into a fuller model. And then for the full model, you're maybe creating assignments. You could even potentially be grading library-related assignments or information-related assignments. And you could manage large chunks of class time, which obviously would be a more intensive involvement. And both Lori and Emily have examples of that. Emily also has an example of kind of a light relationship where students do an automated quiz. And this decision of how to be embedded, we can touch on a little bit in the questions because I'm sure people have them, but a lot of it has to do with our time, the time of the students, the number of students in the class, the preferences of the instructor. It's really, there's a lot of factors that come into this decision about how you set up the embedded librarian in the course. And then this is the last slide that we're going to leave you with before we jump into the Q&A. So this is basically the overview of how we work as a team at Penn State on the embedded librarian model. So I, as the online learning librarian, I'm kind of like overhanging all of this, making the connections happen. But then the subject librarian, right, they have that content expertise, the research skills, the information management skills that students need in those particular courses. And then the subject matter expert or the course author, course instructor, obviously they have the content expertise in their field. They know what the issues are of the students in terms of information and research. They create the curriculum and the assessments. And then the instructional designer is there to really provide support, to give a pedagogical approach to what the instructor might think they want to do in the class or what the librarian might think they want to do in the class. They do things like come up with rubrics, communicate to students, offer educational technology tools that might work really well, think about the quality of the course and the consistency of the user experience within the course, and then also provide some professional development so they can say, you're going to be embedded. We really think that like this is an article or this is a webinar that you should watch if you've never done online learning before and those kinds of things. And then from the online librarian role, I do a lot of coordination of all of the different, people moving together. And there was just a question, Cynthia asked if the slides will be available. Yes, we can definitely make them available. But this is, so I'm that kind of coordinating. I do some quality assessment, try to do some project management. At the beginning, I'm involved in a lot of the conversations to provide support to the librarian, just like the instructional designer is providing support to the faculty member. And then me and the instructional designer kind of fall into the background, and the relationship between the course author, the subject matter expert, and the subject librarian really blossoms at that point. So that is the end of our little brief intro into embedded librarianship at Penn State. Obviously, we could spend a whole hour just talking about it, but we definitely want to make it the interactive featured Q&A. So at this point, I'm going to mute my mic, and all three of us are able to answer any questions that you might have about embedded librarianship, struggles you might be going through, other questions about our program to provide more in depth if I didn't cover it here.
Would you like us to cover one of the provided questions while we're waiting for people to answer? Oh, we have a question.
Yeah. So do you have any advice on advocating for this model or convincing faculty to work with you?
I would say that advocating for this model The faculty that we have worked with thus far have kind of been the biggest advocates that for our work. It's very easy to try to say that we know that we're doing great work and we're really helping these students. But the faculty themselves can see the difference that it's made in the research assignments for those online courses, in having different assignments throughout the course to help the students build research skills and connect with the librarian, and then also actually have a name and a face and a librarian that they can reach out to. That's really definitely changed the quality of the assignments and the quality of the resources that are being turned into that final assignment. So I think that that's really one of the biggest ways to advocate for having an embedded librarian, is that the faculty themselves are seeing an improvement in the quality of the assignments and the quality of the resources that are used.
Another question came in, which is, how do you deal with the large amount of time and librarians that it takes to embed a course?
I would say that you need to look at your responsibilities overall. And for myself personally at Altoona, most of my teaching is with resident students. And I know what that demand is, as well as the time I have to put forth for service projects, research, and so forth. So with what little time is left, then from there I can have a better frame of reference of how much time I can devote for online classes. And with Tori overseeing the entire project, she's able to identify how many classes are realistic to find librarians to be embedded in, so that we're not stretched too thin, that we can't deliver the service that we're promising to.
Yeah, I would agree with what Lori said. And in our article, we talk about, and in the little presentation that Tori gave, the different levels of embedding are discussed. And it might be the best idea, and it really should be, the way to start is to begin with that light level. Pick a class, find the one instructor, and start from there. And maybe only do a light embed for a semester or two, or maybe even more if that's all that you can handle. But see how it goes. Be participating in the class, be present there, be intentional about which courses you choose and the outcomes that you're hoping to have. And realistically, understand that you cannot be in every single class. Even with the number of librarians that we have at Penn State, it's impossible for us to be in every single class. So we've had to be intentional about which courses we can choose. I would also say that when you're moving to higher levels of embeddedness, the first couple of semesters are going to be the heaviest work of getting a lot of the kinks worked out. And we do absolutely take time each semester to kind of go back through any assignments that we've created and things like that. So there is definitely an iterative process there that does take some time. But the first couple of semesters of working with any new course are going to kind of be the most heavy time intensive, though there will be periods of time intensity with each course that you work with, depending on how embedded you are and how many things you have responsibilities over. But if you're staying with the same few courses, over time, the intensity of the workload may dissipate a bit.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of add one more thing to what they said, which is, when we go into these initial meetings with a subject librarian, myself, instructional designer, and the instructor, or the course author, which is not always the same person, because sometimes the person writing the course is not the person who's going to teach it. In those meetings, one of the things I really stress is like a respect of everybody's time. So that makes us selective in the courses that we do end up working with. But also it's saying like, okay, this is going to be a value add to this, not only to the students, but also to the librarian, kind of informing their knowledge of what the students are working on. Some subject librarians, it's even helped inform kind of their collection development, because they can see the types of assignments that students are working on, and then they can acquire materials that are going to help with the courses or those kinds of things. And then the one final thing I'll leave you with is that it shouldn't be, you shouldn't just like say, oh yes, I'm going to be an embedded librarian, without evaluating your overall portfolio of work. It shouldn't be an add-on. Yes, you might want to pilot it for a semester and see how it goes. But even when you pilot it, you should say, okay, is there anything else that this semester can take a back seat or that I can drop? And then if this does become, you know, a significant part of your core responsibilities or your work, are there other things that are less, you know, that I enjoy less maybe, or that other people I can kind of distribute, or that aren't really contributing as much as I feel like this embedded librarian role is contributing. So it's definitely a holistic approach to becoming an embedded librarian.
Great, and that actually answers the first of the pre-prepared questions, which is how can it be sustainable for small libraries? So I think a lot of that advice applies to that question as well. Okay, another question that's come up is that some colleagues are very hesitant about having direct involvement in online classes beyond creating LibGuides or videos. What advice do you have for getting buy-in from subject librarians?
My advice would be for the subject librarian to think of it in terms of it being just another resident class, because exactly what they would be delivering in that resident class is by and large what they would deliver for that online class. Now, they would be starting small, perhaps providing that LibGuide, perhaps providing a bio video. And if they have the luxury of an instructional designer, the instructional designer and the team of people in that realm can help with the technical aspects of putting together those videos. But once you've taken that plunge and you go with the attitude that you're not really teaching anything different to an online student than you would to your resident students, and you develop that relationship with the instructor and you get to know each other and you get to know some of the quirks of the classes and so forth, then you find it becomes, it's fun. It's something you look forward to, and you can grow from there in terms of, do you want to have a discussion forum that the librarian is going to supervise? Do you want to have a part in the grading process? So again, the idea of starting out small to become familiar and then allowing it to grow from there based on the assessments you get back and what you're able to provide time-wise.
Yeah, I agree with Lori, and I saw Tori laughing when were asked this question, because that's something that we're still working through all the other librarians that are embedded at Penn State, to try to encourage some more of our colleagues to become involved. And I think that what Lori said is really spot on about this. I mean, in every library system, no matter what you do in terms of something that might be new, people are going to try to resist that change, and that's just kind of a fact of life. But I think that explaining, as Lori said, how much of what we do as online embedded librarians is so similar to what we do for our resident courses. You don't have to be a technology expert. You don't have to be a Canvas expert. We have instructional designers, and we do have resources from other librarians or other departments within Penn State that can help us with some of those technology pieces. I realize we're lucky to have that. Not every library does. But even if you don't really need to be a tech expert to do this. You just need to be a caring librarian.
And I think we should also note that we have an online course for librarians that would like to participate in this program. So if you've never had the opportunity to teach online, you can take this course and it will help you develop the skills that are needed for having an online presence. Not someone that's just going to go in a static type manner, but someone that can really engage with the students and be a human being on the other side of that screen. So, you know, that support, that training is there, and it certainly would take practice if you've never done it before. But I think the people that we have here that have been a part of this have done a very good job and have earned that training to have that credential behind them, and they're invested in it.
Yeah, and I just want to add then, kind of looking at it from a holistic approach, which I take a lot, or a systemic approach, especially in my role of kind of seeing the big picture of different online course integrations at Penn State, is that we're lucky at Penn State to have a culture where we all feel responsible for all of our students. And I realize not everywhere is like that, but when I have meetings with subject librarians, and I have them quite often, really stress that equivalent access that the distance learning section standards drive, whether that's instruction equivalent or resource acquisition equivalents. It speaks, that resonates really well at Penn State, because that's the culture and the approach that we take for all of our students, no matter which campus they're at. So that is kind of this like common goal that everybody can get around and say like, well, we might have different approaches on what we think that means. We have that starting point, right, that we can negotiate from, or do some like kind of collaborating or thinking about how you could potentially become involved with an online course as a subject librarian if you've never done it before.
The kind of flip side of this, we've got a number of questions related to faculty and any tips on working with faculty who are not as willing to work with this type of a model. And then I think related to that, there seem to be a number of questions by folks who are wondering about, well, what if we don't have access to Canvas courses? So one person saying feels like being involved even at the light level could be challenging for some because they don't have access to Canvas. And then another sort of question related to that, which seems to be, do you find that you've had better luck generating buy-in going directly to faculty or working with the administrators and getting administrators to encourage faculty? So I hope that that is clear, but that sort of getting that faculty buy-in and getting invited into their course.
So the political science program definitely started at that administrator program level. So the instructional designer was someone who was interested in it, but then the essentially the department head of the online portfolio for political science sent out that RFP to her faculty members who were interested in having an embedded librarian. So we started automatically with this buy-in from faculty members, and then once we had a few in political science, it's gotten to the point where we have to say like, no, this course, you know, an embedded librarian isn't really a huge asset to this course, but we are embedded in a fair amount of political science courses because the program administrator was so and continues to be so supportive of the program. And then the faculty members that we started working with, Emily and Lori, started the relationship with those faculty members, are so positive then that other librarians also, or other faculty members also are very interested in having librarians in their political science courses. So the most recent integration is actually in Political Science 594, and there's another librarian who's not here today, but this spring semester he was embedded in their capstone course and did a lot of cool things with the students in that course. So definitely at Penn State, at least, approaching it from a program perspective tends to work well in terms of getting potentially reluctant faculty on board. That being said, there are instances where individual faculty members are very interested in the program, and then they will initiate conversations with us. But yeah, it's definitely getting started, kind of finding that champion that really wants to do it. And then last semester, we gave a presentation to Penn State at a Penn State conference. That's basically like a teaching and learning with technology conference. And in that, you know, the outcome of that presentation was even like advanced interest from other faculty members who maybe a year ago would have been resistant. But then we had faculty members on our panel who were stressing like the one that always surprises me is that even the students' group work has been improved from having an embedded librarian in the course. And that's something that, you know, faculty members have group work and they're like, oh, hey, you know, that's cool that this has the potential to kind of improve the group relationship and the group process. So the program level tends to work well, but then you can have individual faculty members who are interested in it and they're willing to pilot it, and then they kind of talk about it to the other faculty members around them. And when you think about scaling and sustainability, it's a time-intensive process, even for light embeddedness. To think about it critically takes some time. So you couldn't go into, you know, the 20 classes in the program or something like that. So at least at Penn State, we've been lucky that faculty members have been interested at the beginning, and then they spread the innovation.
And one of the things that we've discussed on our different embedded librarian groups throughout Penn State, throughout the libraries, is that in addition to having these positive experiences of the faculty that have already been involved, is reaching out to those faculty who may be involved and explain to them how this would enhance their course and possibly save them some time, because then they don't necessarily have to be responsible for explaining to the students all of the research aspects that they may not necessarily even fully understand. We have so many resources that faculty may not necessarily be aware of and how they would be beneficial to their students and to their course. So the librarian can come and step in and really fill that role that an online course may have not necessarily felt like they had access to before. And that would save time on the part of the instructor by bringing in an additional subject matter expert with this research background and with knowledge of the resources that the library has to offer their students.
Okay, and then again, can you address how, like, to what extent you have access to the LMS in the courses that you're involved in at Penn State? You have access to post and put videos and things like that in?
Yes, so Lori and Emily can touch on individually what they're doing in their courses and kind of what that looks like. But from a technical perspective, that is what the librarian role really started that conversation. And I had to have that conversation with the registrar because there were further considerations over a blanket customized role in Canvas and what this customized role had access to. So we created a customized librarian role basically because of Canvas's permissions are not very granular. So we had to have a customized role. And that gets our foot in the door within the learning management system. Librarians do not have access to courses without being added to courses by faculty members or instructional designers. So we have access to our own courses, for example, Sandbox, or if we want to create some information literacy tutorials that can be imported into other courses, we can do that. But we're not actually in courses until faculty members or instructional designers make the decision to add us to courses. So from a technical, logistical perspective, that's kind of how we get involved with the learning management system, and then they can both touch on what they do in their embedded roles.
Sure. So I have been embedded or been added to Canvas in a couple of different roles. So we do have the librarian role within Canvas that gives the librarian access to a lot of different features. It doesn't give you access to grade or to grades. So in the courses that I work with for our embedded program, aside from some that I work with through my campus, I'm actually added in a teacher role because I do grade for those courses. So I do need to be able to fully access the grade book and the assignments, create quizzes, things like that. And so that, that's definitely an understanding between me and my faculty member that I'm working with and the instructional designer that I'm working with, because it is more of a robust role within Canvas. But in your LMS, if the faculty member has the power to add you to the course in some type of capacity, that's really the best way to be able to communicate with students. I would say that if for some reason you're not really necessarily able to be directly added, working with LibGuides or other SpringShare products that could be shared to the LMS that gives students access to you would probably be a good way to go about that, to have some type of connection and a way for students to contact you pretty easily and use those resources that you've created, even if you can't directly be added to the LMS as a user.
And like Emily, I'm also given the role of instructor in the course, and I'm able to see the grades and do grading. It didn't start out that way. The faculty member was reluctant to allow me to have that privilege within the course, but after 2 or 3 semesters of working with the faculty member and increasing the level of embeddedness, the decision was made that for me to have an effective discussion forum where I can really facilitate what the direction of the conversations, that those conversations have learning outcomes associated with them, that I'm the logical person to grade it. So I think the faculty member, once we took that step, was really grateful because that took a tremendous amount of burden off of her, that she did not have to monitor that discussion forum for 4 weeks. She didn't have to worry about the grades. And she saw the improvement with their final papers based on those discussion forums that we had. So The other thing I can add is that once you have increased that level of embeddedness from light to full, that once that is created, you do not have to go back and reinvent the wheel. Now, some things may have to be tweaked, some things may have to have a little editing in them, but by and large, once you've created your videos, once you have created your quizzes and other instructional activities, they're already made. And each semester, it's just a matter of the instructional designer making sure that they're placed where they needed to be, and you're good to go.
Yeah, online learning definitely takes a lot more preparation time than residence instruction does, but then it tends to stabilize over time unless there's a major revision that comes up.
Okay, thank you. Another question, is the Penn State program run on the basis of librarians volunteering to become embedded librarians, or is it a job duty for all instruction librarians? And related to that, questions about what other job duties do the embedded librarians have beside that in your library? Do you have responsibilities for collection development, database administration, etc.?
Well, at Altoona, I'm the only, we have 3 librarians. I'm not counting the head librarian, but for the 3 librarians that have their feet on the floor every day, I'm the only one that's participating in this program. It's voluntary. So for all of our instruction and our reference and instruction librarians, it's not a required duty. And yes, in addition to the embedded librarian program, I'm responsible for collection development. I work nights. We're required to have our service projects, work on our research, do our instruction for resident classes, work the reference desk X number of hours a week, as well as virtual reference. And I think I missed the other part of the question.
I think it was, well, yeah, I think you actually are answering that. Do you only do embedded instruction, or do you have other responsibilities? So included in that were like system admin, database administration, collection development.
Yes, and outreach projects that are here on my own campus, committee work, both inside and outside of Penn State. And I'm sure for Emily, it's similar. Being at a campus location, there's multiple responsibilities because we just don't have the same amount of staff that they do at University Park. So those of us at the campus locations are wearing multiple hats. I'm not a political science subject specialist as a librarian. I'm reference and instruction, which means I have to oversee multiple disciplines, as opposed to the political science librarian at University Park that is only focused on that particular discipline.
Yeah, so I don't know, and Tori can probably speak to this, that anyone has been hired with the specific goal of being an embedded librarian. It kind of began as other duties as assigned. And it wasn't, not that this was assigned. When I was initially hired in 2016, Tori and I started around the same time. I was liaison to both the School of Business Administration and the School of Public Affairs, which political science fell under, at Penn State Harrisburg. So I have a second master's degree in instructional technology. I'm very interested in online learning and providing access to library resources to distance learners. So I was approached by Tori and my supervisor with this opportunity, should I choose to accept it. And I saw it as an extension of how I was going to be able to serve my students. As I mentioned, the World Campus Criminal Justice Program is the Penn State Harrisburg Criminal Justice Program. When I was assigned to School of Public Affairs, that was one of my responsibilities. So I did really see it as an extension of my responsibilities. Over time, we've added an additional librarian at Harrisburg, so I am no longer the liaison to 2 schools, just the School of Business Administration. But I have enjoyed it so much that I stayed doing the political science courses, in addition to my campus duties, collection development, instruction. I'm the outreach coordinator, so I do all of our library programming and outreach, and all of our social media for our campus. Library, not the whole campus.
Yes, and at University Park, we do have a little bit more specialization, but there's also around 40 20,000 students on campus, and then the 20,000 students of rural campus students. I'm at University Park as my home base. And even there, it's all voluntary. Librarians who choose to become embedded, and they all have other responsibilities. A lot of collections development. I run an ebook program. I coordinate digital badges with my colleagues. So there's a lot going on all the time for all of us, which I'm sure everybody in this call feels constantly. So it's really just, I think that everybody who has been involved with this program, including the three of us, feel that it brings a lot of value to students. It brings a lot of value to our work. It's a high impact practice for students and for us. And so it's worth the time investment, and it's made a significant difference in our portfolio, our expertise, and the student relationships with the library.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, and group of questions is related to how you interact with students. So outside of class sessions, how do you interact with students? Virtual hours, appointments, etc. Related question to that is, if you, the embedded librarian, realize that students have questions on a common issue, do you use the Canvas announcements to explain or answer that question for everyone? Or do you prefer to use an Ask a Librarian forum or other type of forum? And I think I'll leave it at that, because otherwise it gets too complicated.
Yeah, so we definitely, in my practice, if a lot of the same problems are cropping up, I will send out a blanket announcement to everybody. That's just really the easiest way to handle it. And I will say in the email, not one person asked, I will say I've gotten a number of questions related to this, or I'm seeing a lot of confusion about this particular resource, topic, practice, what have you, and send out blanket announcements to the class, which the faculty member does as well. So it really follows in that same model. I would say I use a mix of all different types of resources to work with students. I don't have specific office hours for online because our students are everywhere. So we have a number of students in World Campus that are stationed overseas with the military. And we also just have students that are World Campus students in many different countries. So finding a time slot that would work for all of those classes to host weekly office hours probably just wouldn't be practical. I did want to do that when I first started this embedded process about 3 years ago, but it just wasn't realistic. So instead, we have the discussion forum online. I will set up phone calls with students. I will do Zoom. We use Zoom at Penn State to do a Zoom meeting with them, or we'll correspond via email if that's the only thing that works for them. And I would imagine Lori has the same kind of situation. Like we mentioned at the start of this presentation, we do have some students that are close enough to a Penn State campus but take World Campus classes, so they may pop in and ask for help in person, which we're happy to provide if that happens to be an option for them. But for a lot of it, we're doing it through phone, email, Zoom, other electronic means.
Yes, I'm doing exactly the same thing that Emily is. If anything outside of our discussion forum needs my attention, usually I handle it through email, but if it's going to be something that's going to take significant time, then I'll remind the student that we can set up the Zoom appointment and have a consultation. The LibGuide that I have that's within the course, it has on there that my office hours are by appointment, and that just covers that whole issue that Emily was talking about of people being in different time zones, because it's impossible to have set office hours when everyone is around the globe. So it's by appointment only. And if I hear from a student that they do need an appointment, I will respond certainly at my earliest convenience. No longer than 1 day would go before I would see that request, and I would set the appointment up as soon as possible. And I try to limit those consultations to about 30 minutes, because sometimes there's situations where maybe a student tries to hang on and be needy, so to speak. So I try to keep it limited to 30 minutes. And I also ask students that are requesting appointments to send me what they have worked on already, specifically what their need is, anything that they can share with me so I can do a little groundwork before I meet with them to save everyone time.
And I would just note that specifically for the programs that we're working with, they are all designed to be asynchronous. So we cannot require that students participate in synchronous activities for library resources, but obviously we work with them to make sure that we can meet with them synchronously. We just don't create anything with the expectation that it has to be synchronous, because these programs are specifically designed to not be synchronous.
Yes, yeah. So there are some individual colleges who try to, push Zoom sessions, synchronous sessions, those kinds of things. But even they, as long as if it's a real campus course, you can't make that a requirement unless it's been explicitly, communicated to the students before they get admitted and choose that major, because it is a protocol for those courses so that students anywhere with technology, with Wi-Fi, with bandwidth issues are able to participate in their courses. There are librarians not on this call who have done a few cool things. There's a librarian who's involved in a geography class, and she uses a voice thread to communicate with students. A couple of the librarians have introduced them to Flipgrid, so they really like using Flipgrid, maybe because I like Talk It Up so much, but they really like using Flipgrid in their courses, even with faculty. We have a librarian who is teaching a faculty development course for integrating the library into your online course, and Flipgrid in that course as well, just to kind of build that shared sense of community when you don't have synchronous meetings. So those are just some of the ways that we interact and engage with students. With this political science capstone course that happened just this past semester, basically the students reviewed a module in Canvas that I worked and built with the subject librarian, and then the week after they reviewed that model, it was only 6 students, so they all had an in-depth research consultation because it is for their capstone program.
Okay, we just have a few more minutes, so I think we can maybe fit in 1 or 2 more questions. So I'm just gonna say, how much contact do you have with resident classes? Our normal contact is a one-shot.
Yeah, that's the basis of a lot of my interactions with campus. I do have a couple of different courses that I work with on the resident side where it's a higher level of involvement, kind of more closely looking towards an embedded model, but it's in person, not online. And the class that I'm thinking of most specifically is the introductory business research course for our MBA program at Harrisburg. I do some assignments with those students, and I meet with them a lot. And I have a lot of the same responsibilities in Canvas as I do for my online embedded classes, but primarily I'm doing one-shots with my residence courses.
At Altoona, we also have the one-shots, and I am also working with select instructors. Again, we're trying to be very intentional with what we do with select instructors where I am embedded doing some online work with the students. So we will start with that one-shot, and then from then on, we may have that interaction online through a discussion forum or an online project, and I can go in and I can work with them online and grade as well, just as if it was an online class.
Yeah, definitely the one-shot model is very common. The other thing that we do is we have our digital badge program at Penn State is pretty successful. So we have information literacy digital badges. And so some courses will choose to have students earn badges on their own time. And then it's kind of a flipped classroom approach. And then we can go into the classroom and engage in a deeper instruction session because they've had kind of some of that primer materials offered through the digital badges.
Okay, thank you. And I think this, unfortunately, has to be the last question. I feel like we have so many more questions we haven't had a chance to get to, but our time is limited. So the question is, are you looking at course learning outcomes to decide if course merits an embedded librarian? Is there a wait for faculty who want an embedded librarian, and is there a limit to how many course sections an embedded librarian can take on?
So I'll answer the last part first in terms of course sections. Obviously, it depends on the number of students in the course. That also plays into it. If Emily and Lori both have 2 around, you know, for Role Campus, around 2 courses per semester that they are heavily involved with. And I think that that is, you know, that is a high number, 1 to 2, I would say. I don't really encourage librarians to get involved with more than that, because then you're balancing too many balls and you might not be as effective in those courses, you know, when you spread yourself too thin. So that's the last part of that question, but there was a lot of other parts too.
So part of it was looking at the course outcomes to decide if we needed to have an embedded librarian, and absolutely, that is how we determined which courses, or Tori, I should say, determined which courses should have embedded librarians, and how we are looking at the courses that we're adding to the program now is what are the actual outcomes that these students should be putting together be able to demonstrate by the end of this course. And so having some type of significant research skill or component is a big part of choosing to have an embedded librarian for that class. If the course doesn't involve specific research related outcomes, it probably in the way that we set this up wouldn't warrant an embedded librarian.
And I'll add that we do keep metrics, and we keep them individually. We will survey with the students, we will survey with the instructor and collect that data. And not just tick marks like how many questions did I answer, but also time, because we have to be able to budget our time wisely. And so with each semester, we're able to see what was the time investment, how many students, how many questions, and then we can compile all of that information and use that as a guidepost for future decisions, not only for that specific course, but other courses that might be proposed.
Thanks, everyone. This is Tracy Coyne from the DLS committee. I just wanted to do a wrap up, and thank you so much to our speakers today. It's really wonderful that you were able to be with us, and I thank Tori, Lori, Emily, and I thank Penn State for giving you the time to do this. I'd also like to thank you for sharing your time, your expertise, your anecdotes, and your tips. This is going to be very valuable to many people, so thanks a bunch. Also would like to thank Elois Sharp at ACRL for hosting this, and for the Zoom room monitoring that she did for us. Everything went great. And I'd like to thank our committee. That's the Distance Learning Section, Research and Publications Committee. All the committee members worked on this to put this together, so I'd like to thank them all for their input. Thanks so much, everyone. Just one last thing. Wanted to tell you that the recording of this session will be emailed to you on Monday, March 11th. So please look for that in your email. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. And we'll be sure to share the slides with the committee so that they can be shared out to everybody that was at the presentation. And if you have questions, burning questions that didn't get asked here, we'd be happy to answer them at a later point in time.
Absolutely. Reach out anytime.
Thanks, everyone.